Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. This webinar will start momentarily. If you experience any technical issues, please try logging out and logging back in. If we experience any technical issues on our side, please allow us 5 to 10 minutes for a resolution. Thank you. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Next Steps Tips for Retaking the CFP Exam webinar. My name is Meredith Bonington, and I am a marketing specialist here at CFP Board. Today, we are joined by two CFP professional panelists who have successfully passed the CFP exam after a previous exam attempt. They are here to share their unique insights on preparing for and retaking the CFP exam, including best practices for staying motivated, study strategies, and more. After our discussion, we'll briefly review some exam preparation resources available from CFP Board, and then we'll have some time for a brief Q&A with our panelists. As a reminder, November exam registration is currently open, with early bird closing on September 5th. Now, I'd like to transition over to our two CFP professional panelists. Madison and Craig. Let's give them each a minute or two to introduce themselves. Madison, would you mind kicking us off?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Madison Watson. I passed the CFP exam in July of 2022, so just over a year that I've been a CFP. And I've been in the wealth management space for about 5 years working professionally, but I'm here today because it took me 3 attempts to pass this exam. So my first 2 attempts were not successful, and I learned a lot from it, and I care very, very much about trying to get other folks to the other side and across the finish line with this because I've been there and I know how that feels. So I'm really excited to share what I've learned with everybody today, and hopefully we have a great discussion.
Thank you so much. And Craig, would you mind going next?
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. Craig Butleski with UBS Financial Services. And I passed the exam after 5 attempts. Passed it on my 5th attempt, my 5th and final. And I've also navigated growing a family and getting married all within that time frame of 2016 to 2022. I believe Madison and I passed the same exam period. So looking forward to being here. And I come from the bank and trust world and recently moved over to UBS about 1.5 years ago. So to all my bank and trust people out there too, I'm happy to discuss the nuances therein of not having all the Form ADV and Series 7 and 66 and SIE or say Series 65 information there as well. Happy to be part of the conversation.
Great. Thank you all both so much for your time. Let's get started with our questions. So to kick us off, I know you both mentioned, how many exam attempts you took and a little bit about your backgrounds, but what did you do initially to prepare for the CFP exam? So on your first attempt, would you mind providing our audience with a brief overview with generally how you prepared? And Madison, would you mind answering this question first?
Absolutely. So for my actual first 2 attempts, I had done my education through Boston University, had finished all that up. And then when it came time to choose a review course, I used Brett Danko for my first 2 attempts. So that was, working through the pre-study books, attending the live review sessions, attending the signature sessions you could do once a week, working through flashcards, doing practice questions, pretty much everything that they said to do top to bottom, I was doing it. And I will be very honest, I thought that I was studying at this elite level and just putting in so many hours, and I was. But what I learned was that the exam just required more. My first attempt, I passed 3 out of 8 sections and was floored because I really thought I had passed it when I hit submit. My second attempt, I passed 5 out of 8. So we got better, but we didn't cross the finish line. So I think it was a big combination of doing everything that was laid out for me and, hey, if you do all this, hopefully you'll be in a good spot. And I really did do all of it and did put in over the amount of hours that were recommended, but it just required more. It required more connecting with the material than I had obviously done.
Thank you for sharing. And Craig, do you have anything to add to that? What did your initial exam preparation strategy look like for the CFP exam?
Yeah, so kind of going off of Madison, also thought I was studying at this elite level. I came to the financial services industry from the nonprofit world where I'd done fundraising and plan giving. And so my estate planning was a total knockout. I did all the, that section really well just from my past experience. But, I kind of try to plow through. We were expecting a child. I think the first year I was attempting the CFP exam, so I wanted to get that done. So I plowed through my education piece. I took Dalton all throughout all 5 attempts. And so I plowed through the education piece and then studied probably, looking back now, at a 50% rate. I didn't read all the material, didn't read the booklets that Dalton provided, but I would just do the questions. But then there came a time where I just knew the answers to the questions because I'd been taking them for so long. And so so that was my first initial kind of approach, was a little stressed out, lacked of focus, and just kind of did things my way instead of following the rote instructions by the Dalton preparation course.
I see. And Madison, I know in your answer, you discussed saying that this exam really required more. How did your study strategy change or evolve after your first exam attempt?
Absolutely. Well, my first and second were very similar, I'll say. I mean, after failing the first time, I'll be honest with you, only passing 3 out of 8 sections, I did not have any business turning around immediately that next exam cycle and doing everything the same way again and just hoping that more hours would get me across the finish line. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And so, I was getting a lot of advice from folks. Hey, just turn around, do it right again. Don't lose momentum. And so I took that advice and kind of blindly went into it again and did the exact same thing all the way through. And wasn't successful again. And I would say even the second attempt, I probably put even more hours than my first attempt. And so I want to really stress that although you have to do the work and you have to put in the hours, it doesn't just come down to logging a ton of hours. This exam I've learned, and now, hindsight 2020, this exam is all about how intentional your hours are. If you're studying 2 hours a night or more, are they the best 2 hours you got? Are you locked in all 2 hours? Are you connecting with the material in different ways during that full 2 hours? Or are we just reading? Or are we only answering questions? That's what I had to kind of, sit with myself and realize after my second failed attempt before I got a completely new game plan, I think, for my third attempt.
Thank you. And I really like that comment you made about connecting with the material. And like, we're not just reading, you're really it's about making those hours studying count. Craig, was your experience similar on your after your first attempt? How did your strategy change, and how did you put your next step forward?
Yeah, so I still didn't read on attempts 2 through 3. And I think that it's because reading, I don't learn. I'm more of a video watching kind of person, more of a visual learner, auditory, if you will. So reading is a challenge, and especially who has time to read through 8, somewhat thick books to try to get through the material. So I just think there's a lot of wisdom from the CFP board, especially with either the apprenticeship or getting your 3 years of experience modeled before you can even use the marks. I think that it was after I'd been really in the industry for a good 5 years where I really knew what I was talking about, where I could feel confident. And kind of like Madison said, understanding the information and kind of thinking like a CFP and thinking like the CFP board, right? Not like your insurance exam, not like the this SIE wants you to think like, but thinking like the CFP board, and that takes time. And like Madison said, it takes that intentionality. I always kind of joke with people now, I was like, you have to act like your hair is on fire. Like you've got to pass this exam, and everything that you do becomes this exam for the next 8, 10, 12 weeks. You don't watch football, you don't watch basketball, you just grind it out and you start thinking like it's a mindset shift. And that's what finally got me to the 5th, was just think we'll get to eventually here in this webinar. But it was those slow micro shifts in my mindset where gosh, this is really hard. Man, this is harder than I thought. Man, this is harder than I thought. Taking those steps and making those small tweaks, like actually reading, like starting to try to think like a CFP versus thinking like a trust officer and that kind of thing too. So
Absolutely. And I think going off of Craig's point, he makes such a good point about you kind of have to just make this your world for a little bit, as many of you know, because I'm sure many of you did do that for your first or second failed attempt, whatever number you're on. I will say if you're someone with the mindset of, I'll just fit this exam into my life, I still can do it all. I'd caution that way of thinking, because I got burned thinking that many times. I even then made it my world and still struggled. So I think it's one of those things where you don't have to make it 100% of your life, and you don't see family, and you don't see friends, and you don't have anything else, because you'll go crazy and you'll burn out. But it's got to be the number one priority, and you fit the rest in if you can. You got to get the hard stuff done first and do the things you don't want to do the most first. And then if there's extra time in the day, great, go relieve some stress and spend time with your family or your friends. But this has to come first. And I think oftentimes it's easy to say, well, but I have that bachelorette trip I got to go on, or I got this other vacation I committed to. That stuff in these couple months before you prepare will take you away from this, whether you think it will or not. It really will.
That's a great point, Madison. And I will definitely touch on, managing work, life, study balance, later on in our discussion. But these are very, important points as, someone's maybe going in on their, next exam attempt, how to reframe, their preparation strategy moving forward. But I see, both of you now have passed the exam. You both have your marks. So to kind of pivot this discussion towards what worked, on your successful attempt, what really changed? I know you mentioned a lot of, mindset changes, and, Craig, I know you mentioned expanding, different study strategies and doing more reading and things that obviously work for different learning styles. But, how would you say was, like, if you had to sum it up in like the biggest tip, right? Like, what was something that really you think put you over the finish line for that successful attempt? Madison, would you mind going first?
Absolutely. So I had, after my second failure, I kind of hit rock bottom, and I had a come to Jesus moment of, okay, my way doesn't work. I have to switch up what I'm doing. I put in all the hours. I did what everybody said to do. Okay, that doesn't work. So I have to change something, even if it's uncomfortable. So I asked around to a ton of people. I posted on the discussion board forum. I did everything I could to try to just figure out what's available to me, what can help, what's different. And where I landed actually was I did switch programs just to see if something else would help me. And I'll be honest, I don't know that programs truly make a difference. Whoever you use, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. But I did switch programs just to see, and I used Dalton on my third attempt. But the thing that I will say till the end of time that put me over the edge was I got a tutor. I, for a while, probably didn't even know that tutors were available, but also had a pride element associated with it, and was like, well, I don't know anybody else who's used a tutor. None of my friends that have already passed this used one. They were fine just doing the books and doing a review. Like, I don't want to spend the money. I don't think I'd need to do that. But by the time I hit rock bottom, I was like, you know what? I'll take anything that helps me. I'll spend whatever I got to spend. I will put the time in to do something different. And I got a tutor. So I used Paul Austin as my tutor. And I think that made the world of a difference, because what we did to prepare differently was I worked with him from January of 2022 and said, I'm going to give myself 7 months. I'm going to shoot for July. I'm going to leave no stone unturned. Let's go through everything again, start to finish, and make sure all the cracks in my foundation are filled in. Let's talk about all these concepts at a deep level. Like, let's just really go for it. And we worked together for 7 months. And I'll say something that really, really helped me when we were working together was, he'll give you questions just like any other, review course. You'll have a ton of questions. We would go over questions, and it wouldn't be enough for me to just say, I think the answer to number 4 is B, or I think it's B because of X, Y, Z. No, I had to be able to explain, why is A wrong? Why is C wrong? Why is D wrong? And because I would wrestle with so many questions, we would have in-depth discussions on why a question was right or wrong. I really was learning this stuff at a completely different level, at a different depth, and being able to apply it the way that, Craig mentioned before, the CFP board wants you to apply it. Because I'm sure a lot of you realize, we're all good advisors day in and day out, with or without the marks. But the thing that puts you over the edge is being able to answer the questions on this exam the exact way that the CFP board wants you to, whether it's makes sense or not, whether you like it or not, you got to do it. And that's what it requires to pass. And I was told for years, you know, this exam tries to trap you. There's all these traps. And I'm thinking, where? Like, I don't know. I just think it's either right or wrong, or there's two really good answers and you got to pick the best one. It wasn't until I was having really in-depth discussions about complex material where I was like, of course they want me to pick that one, because that would be the trap. That's if you don't know much, that's the one they're going to want you to pick, but that's why it's this other one. So I felt like a completely different person when I sat in that room, the third attempt, being able to sit down and say, okay, start with what I know. All right, it's not A because this word makes that question wrong. It's not B because that's the definition for something else. All right, it's between C and D. D has to be the trap. I know they want me to pick that. Okay, it's C. I mean, that was my process for everything. And I never was sitting in the exam room, attempt 1 or attempt 2, thinking that way. So it's a very long-winded answer, but that is truly, I mean, I switched programs, I got a tutor, and I still had access to other pre-study books. And I think that was kind of the perfect cocktail of a great question bank, good pre-study books, and working with somebody who I could have discussions with.
Thanks, Madison. And, definitely in your response, the more detail, the better. We're here to hear what's worked for you. And I thank you for, sharing how you had a different approach and that was successful for you. I'm going to turn this question over to Craig. How was your successful exam attempt different? How did you, go in feeling with that mindset change, and how did you change your approach and see results?
Yeah, so I started with one child in 2016, and then in 2022 we had 4, and so we had a full household, lots of kids, lots of things going on, soccer activities, so on and so forth. And so before I sat down and paid the registration fee for this exam, I talked to my wife. I said, "Do you think this is a good idea?" I asked kind of some of my closest friends just for their thoughts, and the same kind of theme kept popping up is, how bad do you want this? How bad do you want this? Is this what you want to do? I'm like, well, of course it's what I want to be an advisor. Like, well, if this is the direction you want to take your professional career, it's now or never. You got to take your CFP exam, because life is only going to continue to get more busy. Life is only going to continue to be more stressful, right? And so we sat down, and my wife and I, we laid out our schedule. Saturday mornings were a big day for me. I got up every Saturday at 5 o'clock, and I put a whole 5 hours in, right? So I got in around 6, went to the office. So I had a separate space so I could focus and study. I leave around, noon, 1 o'clock, and, go home and be with the family. Then after that, I wouldn't study again until Monday. But I spend every day after the market close about, 3 or 4 o'clock Central Time till 6 o'clock, right? Then I go home, care for my family, then I would study again. Before it was kind of haphazard, so my studying really dialed in. Actually read the books on the 5th and final time. Imagine that. Reading material actually helps instead of just watching videos and taking the questions. So taking that time really, helped me focus. And then, it's like I said, this mindset shift, but it is. It's a, do I want my kids who now know that are old enough to understand what dad's doing? Do I want them to know that I failed, right? Do I want them to know I wasn't successful in passing this exam? And that pressure, wasn't unhealthy by any means, but just a little bit more of skin in the game, if you will. I kind of went all in. And I didn't get a tutor. I didn't do any of that stuff, but I did, attend live in-person reviews with Dalton, both this time and in the past, and those helped just to kind of reiterate and kind of, build a community, I guess, if you will, people kind of going into this exam cycle. So it comes down to, for me, answering the question, do I really want this? Am I willing to put the work in? And then can I put the work in with my current schedule? Answering those 2 questions, along with a spouse or a significant other that are there to support you and who understand what you're doing. I think that's the biggest thing, that freedom and that space that creates to be able to really be focused, right, on just consuming this material. And I think I took it was well over 5,000 practice questions with this preparation. I mean, that's probably a little overkill, but again, it was just this, I wanted to pass, and it was, you could tell, right? And I think that, with my prior attempts, it was just kind of I got, 4, 5, 6 weeks into the study program, and I kind of started to have a lull, or the Huskers started their football season, or we're having a good basketball season, whatever the case might be, and then I would start getting distracted, right? So it was that focus and that yes that I gave to myself, and the promise, I made unofficially to my kids. I think that's really what was a differentiator for me, is I really took it on myself, and I did everything I could, because I didn't want to leave any stone unturned, and kind of like Madison said.
Thank you so much, Craig, for sharing your experiences. And you touched a lot on in your answer that I definitely want to talk about more, including having those conversations with your family, and areas where you can receive support. It's a concern that we frequently see on our candidate forum is around time management. And Madison, you touched a little bit in on this earlier about how do I manage all my other obligations? How do I have a work-life balance on top of studying? And what's, what the best approach is really for that. So I'm actually going to, pivot this question back over to Madison, if you wouldn't mind diving a little bit deeper in, how did you really manage your time in between all these other obligations? And, do you have any advice or tips on people who are trying to, manage their schedules and also, really have meaningful study time?
Absolutely. I will start by saying I'm a planner. I'm a control freak. I got to know what's going on that day, or it's probably, if I don't decide for myself, I got to get these 10 things done today, or these 5 things done, it's probably not getting done if I didn't kind of commit to it. I don't want to spend each day negotiating with myself what we're going to get done. And it's very easy to do that with this exam of, oh, I think I'll study, a little bit of general principles and a little bit of insurance today. If you don't know exactly what you're going to sit down and study, it might not get done. So I say all that to say I would break out my day, and it was pretty much the same, routine I had for almost 7 months. I'm somebody who's got to get a workout in. So I would wake up in the morning, I would go to Orange Theory, I'd come home, I'd work the whole day. I'd have an hour where I'd give myself off. Just don't, spend any time thinking about stuff, cook dinner, call my family, call my friends, do what I got to do, just to give myself an hour break. And then from 8 to 11 each night, I'm pretty much studying. So that was the same day I pretty much lived over and over, but that's what it took. I will say a couple of things and just tips that really helped me was, because I wanted to be so intentional with my time come round 3, because I'd put all the hours in it. That wasn't all for nothing. Those first 2 attempts were not for nothing. That built the foundation for what I'm working with now in attempt 3. So I wanted to be very intentional with this study time now, and I shifted more towards a task-driven study plan as opposed to a time-driven one. Whereas before, I would have thought, okay, it's Saturday, I'm going to sit down, I finally don't have to work, I'm going to sit down for 7 hours because I have it. I don't know many people who can sit down for 7 hours straight and have a really productive 7 hours. Some people can do it. I'm not one of them. So I had to start saying, okay, for today and tomorrow, what are the 3 things I want to accomplish each night that's going to move me forward, that I know it's doable, but it's probably going to take some time and it's going to challenge me. And I would almost itemize out my study schedule of what specifically it was going to look like. So for example, if I knew I only had 2 hours that night, I would sit down and say, okay, to make this the best 2 hours and capitalize on this time and almost put a premium on that time. Okay, the first hour is going to be me, watching one of the Dalton videos. The next hour is going to be, or the next half hour is going to be me doing as many QBank questions as I can. The final half hour is me going to be going through my wrong answer book or whatever it is. I knew for that chunk of time what I was doing. That way I could know, okay, did I get it done? Yes or no? I got to go back and finish it if I didn't. But then also I'm checking in with myself. Are we using every minute and being productive here? Or are we on our phone? Are we not getting through what we're supposed to do? Did the 2 hours become 4 because we weren't locked in? I can promise myself, hey, if you get these couple things done, we're done. And then you can go live your life and you can go enjoy your day. But if you don't get them done, we're sitting here for longer. So I did task versus time is kind of what I like to call it. And then I had to relinquish some control and I had to take a day off, which I know a lot of people don't want to hear. I didn't want to hear it when I was told to do it at the beginning. But it is something that is so important. And I think, Craig hit on it earlier. A lot of people, it's an underrated skill, I would say, is being able to take the day off, because we all are studying at such an extreme level. We're going so hard. And when we have a weekend where we're finally not at work most of the day, we want to maximize how much study time we can get out of it. But I would challenge all of you to take at least one weekend day off. The way I think of it is you only have so much capacity every day to make really solid decisions, especially with your study material. So if you aren't taking one full day off to just release, by the next Monday, you're going into that week running on E, running on fumes, going through the motions, and you will burn out quick. You'll keep going, but mentally you'll be done. And what that usually translates to is making dumb mistakes that you wouldn't have otherwise made, not reading the question the way it's really written because you're gassed, or just, answering questions incorrectly that you probably wouldn't have missed because you're mentally burnt out. And say you're going to take this November exam, we don't want you peaking in the middle of September. We want you peaking in November. So we got to make sure that whatever your study plan is, whether you're planning for 3 months out, 6 months out, a year out, that you're planning it in a way where you know what you're doing each day, but you're pacing yourself so that you can make it all the way and peak when you need to peak. So again, to reiterate, task versus time, one weekend day off, and almost just giving up some control. Even if you studied every single day in your first couple attempts, that didn't work. So let's try something new with giving up just a day to recharge your mind. You need that.
Madison, I really like that approach. And I mean, I think you said it best yourself, task versus time. I think a lot of folks, we see this reflected in the candidate forum, or wondering how to best effectively use their time. And that day off approach also allows you to have time for other obligations and, not only be the freshest mindset and in the headspace, but also, manage those other obligations. So I really appreciate your thoughtful answer on that. I'm going to turn this question back to Craig. Is there anything else that you want to add, Craig, about, time management and what worked for you specifically?
Yeah, so my first, I don't know, 3 or 4 attempts, I would put all the things in my schedule and I would, put them in my Outlook, and I would schedule, okay, this is when I read chapter 1 and this is when I watch video 4, whatever the case might be. I feel like sometimes I spent so much time organizing my studies. Dalton does a great job, and I don't know, Madison, if you kind of thought the same thing, but they give you this spreadsheet basically where they say, here's all the tasks that need to be done, and here's the recommended weeks that they need to get done in. So just back into the start date, so November exam, probably going to start here late August, this, or is it December? I don't even know when the December exam is going to start, late September, or whatever the case is, just back into the day. And I just literally printed that paper off and had my highlighter, and I would just highlight as I cross things off. And mentally, it kind of got me to a point where I was saying, okay, like I'm this much closer to being done. Oh, I'm this much closer to being done. Or, oh, there's only this many weeks left. And then also you kind of start to see the highlights and the things that you're crossing off your list. And that was really empowering to me. I don't know why I didn't do it before, but just that the fact of, the physical, movement of the marker across, or the highlighter across the paper, but also that the visualization of, hey, wow, I really accomplished a lot so far. I'm going to keep going, right? So that mindset mix was just keeping things simple, right? You pay these companies money for their materials and their systems, like use them. Don't try to make your own system, right? Use the system that you're paying for. And we talked about this when we were preparing for this webinar. It's like, we're not here to promote one or the other. Madison and I we both, just happened to use Dalton as we passed on the exam that we passed. But I mean, I also failed with Dalton, so I just think it's, using the material that they give you and actually doing the work and following that process. It's a time-tested process, right? I mean, it wouldn't keep repeating it, rinse and repeat every exam cycle if it didn't work. And so I just encourage you to keep it simple and use what you're paying for, right? And don't spend your time doing other things other than like what's on the paper.
Thank you, Craig. And I really appreciate, your response, and especially that when you were talking about almost celebrating those small victories, like that sense of accomplishment is really important, and almost being able just to cross something off, or it's important as we, any part of taking the exam is really honing in on that motivation. And that kind of leads me to my next question is that, motivation is so important for proper mindset, for, like Madison said, right? Like not running on empty, being able to really be present and focused during your preparation. What would you say is your biggest tip for staying motivated after hitting a roadblock in your studying, or what worked best for you personally with, getting over those hurdles if there was a rough point in your studying or a particular challenge in a content area? Madison, would you mind answering that?
Yeah, so I'll be the first to say I know that I hit many roadblocks in my, 7 months preparing for my successful attempt, even many mental breakdowns, a lot of tears. That's normal. I hate to say it. It's something that I've been through. I lived it. But I would always remind myself, like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I want this? And I just remind myself why I want it so bad. And for me, it was, I wanted my world to open up with my career and what I was able to do. I wanted to be the best advisor for my clients, not just because I care about them, but because when I'm sharing an idea or giving advice, I want to feel so confident that I know what the heck I'm talking about, because I had seen before, whether you've, worked with teammates before or worked at previous firms with other folks, where sometimes you hear the advice given and you're like, that is not right. That's not accurate. And sometimes it's just given. I never wanted to be that person. I wanted to be like, hey, I had to take this test so many times. I better know the material better than everybody. And I want to make sure that I can give the best advice possible and feel confident in what I'm saying every single day, because I did lack confidence before I had my marks. I really did. So I reminded myself why I was doing it, and that all this time being put in wasn't for nothing. It would be for something eventually, but I had to stay the course. I had to stay disciplined, and I had to just kind of pick myself up every day, even when it got hard.
Thank you. And that's a really wonderful point that you're touching on there with finding your why. And, it's something that I know a lot of people, keeps them going, right? So thank you very much. Craig, was your experience, staying motivated similar to Madison's? What would you say is your biggest tip for, staying motivated after facing a roadblock in your studying, or, trying to cross that finish line on a certain area?
Yeah. So as I alluded to, I'm a pretty visual person. And so I would have like a picture of my ideal home someday, my ideal lake house, and not driving my old Honda SUV, right? I have all these visuals, right, that I literally had. I have printed out and I put them in my study. I had a study folder and I just taped them to the inside. So every time I'd open that up, I'd see those reminders of, I'm not a materialistic person, but my wife and I, we got vision, we got goals that we want to accomplish. And some of those were on there, like a brick house with a circle drive. That's what we really want, right? We want a small little lake house where we can go and commune with our family. And I know this probably isn't, CFP compliant, but I wrote out, or I typed out Craig Pitleski, CFP, right? And I taped it to my monitor, right? So it's just like those kind of reminders, and just keeping the why at the forefront, I think, is important. So I'd recommend doing that, seeing, I get, before my wife and I got married, she would write, Mrs. Pitleski, or whatever the case may be, just that vision of like, okay, Craig Pitleski, CFP. Okay, this can happen if I get back and refocus and kind of grind a little bit harder today. And those visualizations, those weren't, I used those in attempt 5, right? It wasn't anything before. Before I was just doing it just to get it done, right? Without a real purpose. And so I think defining that, and I think having that in a place where you're going to see it every day when you open up the books to study, I think would have a positive impact on most of your approaches, and especially navigating through and pushing through those tough times.
Thank you so much, Madison and Craig. Your responses really speak to a lot of the why. And like I said, motivation is so important. And I hope that our, audience has gained a little bit of that inspiration, because like you said, that visualization is really, really important, when you're making these choices for yourselves. Just to close out our discussion, and kind of building off of this point that we have, talked about here, What would you say, now you both now have crossed that finish line, right? You've both passed the exam, made it through any struggles that, you faced during that process. And you're now CFPs. And I think maybe our audience might want to hear, since obtaining, your marks, what have been some of the benefits that you've found having this, certification, and, how has it, advanced your career or really added to your credentials? Madison, would you mind starting us off with this?
Yes, I think the first, and I hit on it a little earlier, but I want to drive the point home. The first thing for me was confidence. I noticed my confidence in not just the material, but in myself, in my career, my profession, everything. I was a different person once I, accomplished this goal, had the marks. And, even though when I was preparing for my final attempt, I felt like, okay, I really am learning this at a deeper level. I feel like I know this stuff a lot better now. Yes, I can apply that day to day in my work, and nothing necessarily changed in, what I was saying at, with, when I'm talking to my clients or when I'm talking with colleagues. Nothing really changed, but the confidence that I had in myself was very different, where I wasn't afraid to speak up in a meeting about a certain topic. If a client asked a question and somebody in the room didn't know it before, I may just be like, okay, I think I know the answer, but I'm not positive if I'm 100% accurate. I didn't pass this exam yet, so maybe I don't know. Now it's okay, I'm happy to give you what I got, and I'm confident in what I'm saying. And there's still times where I have to say, okay, this is what I remember. I'm almost positive this is what I got. Let me go back and make sure. I'll get you the answer. And there's even more confidence when I'm saying that. So confidence is one thing. And I think another thing is too, once you have those marks attached to your name, especially whether you're marketing yourself on LinkedIn or any other way, I really think your world opens up and people do reach out and people do see you differently. It is an optics thing. It is a perception thing, but it also, inside yourself builds a lot of confidence.
Thank you. Craig, what would be your answer to this question around, the benefits of certification, and, what was your experience like after getting those marks, and how did it help you better serve clients and those you're interacting with?
It's easy just, without the marks, we all kind of advised before, oh, you can trust me, you can, I'm a fiduciary, I'll work in your best interest, all these different things. Well, it's different like saying that than like saying, well, like I'm ethically obligated because of the commitment I made to the CFP board every year that I, repay and renew or whatever the case is. Like I'm held to this high standard, right? And it's like, you can know a lot about the law, but you can't practice the law without passing the board exam or whatever they call it, the bar. So I just think it's like, yeah, we can know a lot about financial planning, and some of us on the call, maybe you won't pursue CFP marks, and that's okay. But some of us are, we're teetering on this balance beam of like greatness, right? Where you can just take your practice to the next level. I'm going to give a very tangible example of how this all kind of came to play out, very through the financial lens of, I'm working at UBS and people do a Google search in Lincoln, Nebraska for a financial advisor. These people saw that I was a CFP, and they were interviewing different firms, and it came down, we pitched a little bit, fees, whatever the case might be. They came back to us and they said, well, hey, because you have, both of you are CFPs, we just feel like we can really trust you. And it's $1 million relationship, and they're, bringing in anywhere between, 200 to 300,000 a year and, annual additions to their portfolio here at UBS. And it's like, I'm not saying that that's guaranteed for anybody, but I'm just saying without those marks, like would that conversation have been different, or would they have gone a different way? And I think that, just having those 3 letters behind my name, I think that the marks and the weight that they bring to the conversation, I think is just invaluable. And I know that's why you're all on the call today. That's why, Madison and I, we slugged it out. She, 3 times, me 5, because we wanted something more for us and more for our clients. I think that the CFP exam is challenging because it should be a heightened level of professionalism, a heightened level of weight behind your name and behind what those marks mean. So.
Thank you both so much for your insights and all this helpful information. I know that this was very inspiring and uplifting for me, and I hope it was the same case for our audience members. Just as a reminder to our audience, we're going to reserve a few minutes towards the end of this webinar for our panelists to directly answer any questions that you may have. So if there's something during this discussion that had that light bulb moment for you and you want to submit a question to our panelists, feel free to submit that question using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. In the meantime, though, I'm going to review some of the CFP Board exam resources that we have available to candidates and provide a little bit more information on these resources. Now, just as a reminder, you can view all of the resources I discuss here and more information about them at cfp.net/exam resources. So let's start with CFP Board practice exams. The CFP Board practice exams are really the closest experience to what you can expect on exam day. One free practice exam is included with exam registration. Many questions have actually appeared in previous exams and have now since been retired, so you can practice with them on the practice exam. The questions represent a full range of topic areas of the current CFP exam. You'll have a 24-hour access period to use the practice exam once you start it. You can return to the practice exam as often as you'd like during this 24 access period. And as you take the practice exam, you'll have access to view the questions and review the rationale, showing the correct responses question by question. While taking the practice exam, you'll also notice a clock set for 3 hours per session, 6 hours total. This is the same amount of time allotted for the 170 questions on the exam. So while you can continue while time runs out on the practice exam, many folks find this feature helpful, aiming to pace themselves with the material. CFP Board practice exams also provide an excellent mock exam experience as it utilizes the same exam software. And upon completion, you'll receive a diagnostic score report. This result report will provide you your performance relative to each principal topic knowledge domains. And it can be a useful tool in identifying knowledge gaps to better target studying effectively. So if you want more information on this resource or instructions on how to add it to your account, like I said previously, you can go to cfp.net/exam resources. The next exam resource we'll discuss briefly, and this came up in our roundtable discussion as well, is our candidate forum. So as many of you may even be frequent visitors of the candidate forum, our candidate forum is an online discussion board for candidates to really get that peer-to-peer support as you prepare. You'll find a lot of information related to preparing for the CFP exam, hear from others' experiences on the forum. You can get advice, things like that. So we also have Ask a Pro sessions where you're able to ask questions with CFP professionals. And while we do have an open discussion forum, we also have a study group forum, which has everything from exam tips to sample questions to view. So highly encourage you to join the conversation with us at candidateforum.cfp.net. The next exam resource we have is our Candidate Exam Toolkit. This resource really focuses on helping you study for the exam and outlines best practices for a successful exam preparation process. So as some general tips, best practices and guidelines. The CFP Exam Candidate Preparation Toolkit has 2 components, which is the first kind of charting your path to CFP certification. So, it shows like that, almost speaking to that why we were having in our discussion. And then the second section has the develop of a test strategy, which goes over topic areas for the CFP exam and suggests methods of study that play to strengths of different learning styles. So, as something Craig mentioned in his answers, everybody has a different learning style and approach, and we try to incorporate as much resources as we can in this toolkit. The toolkit also details tips on creating a supportive learning environment and developing a test strategy, as well as, outlining the CFP board learning objectives. While the preparation toolkit focuses on helping you study for the exam, our CFP candidate handbook focuses a lot on what to expect actually on exam day. So it's having that exam day experience, kind of like think of it as your guide to the CFP exam day process. Here's where you'll find information on what to expect on exam day, things such as registration, scheduling deadlines, and other related policies around scheduling your exam. Of course, there are also some additional resources outlined here, including, an outline of principal knowledge topics and details about our CFP Board mentor program, which actually leads me into my next slide, which is the CFP mentor program. So this is the last resource I'll provide a brief overview for. The CFP Board mentor program provides an opportunity for candidates preparing for an upcoming exam to connect directly with a CFP professional mentor. This is a volunteered based resource, so there is no cost associated with the mentor program. Mentoring can help candidates focus on a variety of things, including time management, study strategy, staying motivated, and more. If you're preparing for an upcoming CFP exam, we encourage you to connect with a CFP professional mentor and gain from their unique insights and experiences. One of the major themes of this webinar today is that, different things work for different people and everybody has their own individualized approach. So sometimes hearing that unique experience from a mentor can really make a difference. Like I said, this is a unique resource as mentors can share their experiences, much like our panelists today, on what worked for them. If anybody in attendance today is taking the November 2023 exam, the mentee enrollment period is actually open and you'll need to enroll by September 5th to participate. You can find out more information about the mentor program at cfp.net/mentor. And if you have any questions about the mentor program, please email mentor@cfpboard.org. Other exam resources, like I mentioned, you can find them all compiled at cfp.net/exam resources. This also includes an exam prep checklist, a list of habits of successful candidates, tax tables and formulas, etc. So if you want to review these exam resources and receive more information, please visit cfp.net/exam resources. Now I'll pass this over to my colleague, Cynthia, to lead our Q&A session. Again, as a reminder, if you have any questions you'd like to have our panelists answer, please include them in the Q&A chat box and we'll be sure to read them out. If for whatever reason, if we don't get to your question, you can email getcertified2023@cfpboard.org. With that being said, Cynthia, I'll let you take this over.
Great, thank you. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. If you haven't already, please enter any questions in the Q&A chat below. I'll be reading out a few and having our panelists answer. So first off, someone asked, how would you know that you are ready to take the exam again?
I think my best answer to that is I don't think I ever felt 100% ready and 100% confident and like, okay, this is the time where I'm going to get it done. But I will say that going into my third attempt, I did everything I possibly could at that point. I knew I had left no stone unturned. I went through every, course possible over again with a tutor, filled in every crack, did as many practice questions as I could. I mean, there was nothing more that I could have given. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm ready. Where I've, worked with people before, or talked with even some friends who went into some exams being like, okay, I know I'd be better served if I went back to these couple sections again, or if I had a little bit more time. And if you're feeling that way, I would encourage you to not tie yourself to a certain exam cycle if you know that there's more that you could do. Now, again, some people have to do certain cycles or they have to get it done for work or whatever it may be. And I understand that, not everybody can take this approach. But if you can take the approach of not being so tied to just getting it done immediately and giving yourself more time, that was the approach I took because I was like, I am doing this one more time and I'm going to give it absolutely everything I have. But if I ever felt like there was something I could have still covered or a section I didn't really spend enough time with, or in Craig's case, like maybe portions I didn't read, then I'm going to extend it out. So that would be my advice there.
Yeah, Madison, and I will just kind of piggyback off of you and just say, like, be honest with yourself. Like, we all know ourselves better than anybody else. Like, am I really ready to dedicate the time, right? And write down what it's going to take. You know, I took 5,000 practice questions. That's a lot of time, right? I read every single word in that book. That's a lot of time. So just be honest. Like, can I handle this right now? You know, maybe you're getting married, or maybe you're, you know, moving to a different city, or maybe you're preparing for a big, you know, proposal at work. I mean, maybe this isn't the right time, you know, but like, be honest with yourself and write down your why. And I think that would be when you know, like, when you know that you're ready. You know, is my state in life, am I, you know, am I at a point of, you know, where I have my stuff together, right, personally and professionally? Do I have the bandwidth, right? I mean, just be honest with yourself and saying, oh, I'll figure it out, I'll make it work. That's fine. But I mean, I had to really, you know, get intentional. So did Madison, right? Writing things down, scheduling things out, making sure we talk to our family and significant others that, you know, this is what I'm doing. Are you on board with this, right? If you can answer yes to all that, like, then I think you're ready. So
much time do you think is helpful when preparing to take the exam again? Was the 7th month lead up better than any other time period? What sort of time frame do you think people should be looking at when looking to retake the exam?
You know, I think that the 7 months was helpful for me because that's just what I needed to get through everything that I said I wanted to get through. And keep in mind, I had to realize where I was at going into my 3rd attempt. So my first attempt, I mentioned I passed 3 out of 8 sections. Second attempt, 5 out of 8. Okay, I'm still not in that range where I usually tell candidates, just my personal advice, this isn't anything that's Bible, but if you're not at that 6 out of 8 range, I wouldn't immediately turn around and take it again that next cycle. I would give yourself time and not rush it. Maybe there are some of you on the line that just need to do some fine tuning and tweaking towards the end, and you're great, and turn around in 3 months and you're fine. But if it's less than 6 out of 8 sections that you've passed, you probably just need a ton more time connecting with the material in a different way, not just time. It's not about just hours, because I'm telling you right now, I've heard people say, oh, you need 250 hours of studying to pass this exam, or 300, whatever it may be. Between my first 2 attempts, I probably put in 500 hours and I still didn't pass. So that's not to discourage anybody, but it is to say, like, please, I urge you to be intentional about the hours, and not tie yourself to, okay, it needs to be 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week. It needs to be, man, I moved through material this week and I understand it, or I was able to have awesome discussions about it this week, or, you know, instead of just taking your question bank questions and saying, okay, I missed this one, 2 weeks later, I got the same question. I know I just got it right because I remembered it from the first time. We don't want that. We want you knowing why you're getting it right or why you're getting it wrong and learning from it every time. So I would probably urge you to stay away from the hours element.
yeah, for sure, Madison. I'll just say, I think I said this earlier, you know, with Dalton, they give you a spreadsheet and it has, you know, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, exam week, all the things that you need to do. That might take some people an hour, it might take some people 10 hours, right? So it's just figuring out what you need as far as a time frame, and kind of working with that. So I'm a slow reader, so it took me a little bit longer, but I answer questions quickly, right? So again, know yourself and move forward accordingly.
Do you ever fall behind on your study schedule due to just life events? And do you have any advice for anyone that might be in a similar position?
I would say, I don't know that I would say I fell behind. There are certain days that I didn't get through the things I wanted to get through, but I committed to myself that, hey, if there's anything I missed, I'm getting after it tomorrow, or it's not going to become okay, 2 days in a row we didn't study, or 3 days in a row we didn't study. Obviously, sometimes your schedule isn't going to be perfect. That's life. You know, I can't tell you I had a perfect study week every single week. I surely did not. But it's going back to what Craig said, being very honest with yourself about what you have accomplished and what you haven't. And life does happen. You know, you either get, you know, somebody gets hospitalized, you got a family member to take care of, you got friends going through things. That is life, and you do need to balance it all. But I wouldn't say I necessarily ever got to a place where I let myself get too behind, but it was simply because I wasn't going to let it happen because this was the ultimate goal. I know that's easier said than done because life does happen, but that was my situation.
Yeah, and I think it's the whole mindset of if you miss one, don't miss two, right? And never 2 days in a row. And even if it's just like a few things that you do on the second day because something did happen, you're still progressing forward. And I think that what I liked about I said, okay, I'm going to take Sundays off, right? The Lord's Day. But if a Tuesday came around and a kid was sick and I had to help a drop off and pick up and daycare and whatever, well, then I might take Sunday afternoon, right? And I might take Sunday evening to make up for that time. So if you have that chunk that I'm going to call it a little bit of a gap in your schedule where you can backfill some stuff, I think that that's really helpful as well from a time management and kind of feeling behind. I know that I fell behind significantly in attempts 2, 3, and 4, probably because I didn't have my why figured out, and I wasn't really probably performing at my best. But I missed 2, 3, 4 days in a row, and then by the time next thing you know, you're a whole week behind, and then you're stressed out and you're rushing and you're not reading, and then that's a recipe for disaster. So encourage you to, you miss one, don't miss two, and do something small every day, even if it's not the whole thing. Just keep checking things off the list.
Absolutely, I would piggyback off that even more, Craig. And if it's, hey, you can't give the 2 hours you wanted to give, if you got your best 30 minutes, give it your best 30 minutes, or structure your studying in a way where it's, maybe I do an hour in the morning and with the intention that I'm going to do another, couple tasks in the evening. And if I don't get to them, then, that was unfortunate for that day, but at least I got my hour in the morning, or at least I got these couple of tasks accomplished in the morning. That way, you did something. Or if you can only give 20 minutes, maybe it's your best 20 minutes that day. I'm not saying make that a habit, but there are going to be days where you can go 4 hours because you're on a roll, the momentum's building, you're just kind of hitting that high with your studying. Do it, because there will be days where you can only give 25, 30 minutes.
Thank you. I think time for just one last question. Both of you mentioned a key difference for you was learning the material on a deeper level. What did you do differently on subsequent attempts that you felt helped to unlock that deeper level of understanding?
Mine was just having in-depth discussions about it. So, my tutor and I, we would go through a question. If I'd get it wrong, we're debating why that was wrong. I'm saying, I don't get why this is wrong. I mean, I'm thinking this, I learned this concept, I don't understand. And we're battling through it. That way, if I ever see that question ever again, it's not a matter of, oh, I know I missed this before, but I can't remember what the answer was and I don't know why. It's not that. It is, oh, I remember the discussion we had, and this is exactly the example he used, and this is the kind of client you use this for, and the circumstance when you don't, et cetera, et cetera. So again, for me, I'm somebody who's got to talk it through. I got to hear it. I got to have an example. I got to work through it, and then it'll be ingrained in me. So that's how I'm learning at a deeper level. I'm not going to get there personally by just rereading the pre-study book again, or doing a ton of questions where I don't really understand why I'm getting them wrong, even if I'm going over the answers. So for me, it was through discussions.
Yeah, Madison, and I'll piggyback off that. I think that the best thing that I was told in one of my live review sessions, this is probably after attempt 2 or 3, but was to explain why the question is not right, or the answer is not right. So whether the question, okay, A, it's not it. Okay, well, hold on, Craig, why isn't that it? B is not it. Okay, why is that not it? Because then that gets your mind thinking at a deeper level, and it catches you in those, you get things down to 50-50. It's very easy to do on the exam. You get down to 50-50, but you're picking the wrong 50. Well, why? Well, are you explaining why things aren't correct? I think that's a deeper level where you're not just memorizing, oh yeah, this is wrong, but why is it wrong? And why does the CFP board think that this is wrong?
Well, I think that's all we have for time. A huge thank you again to our volunteer panelists for sharing their experiences preparing for the CFP exam. Again, if you have any questions that weren't answered during the session, please send them to getcertified2023@cfpboard.org. As a reminder, the November exam registration is currently open. We here at CFP Board encourage you to continue on your path to CFP certification, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. A recording of this webinar will be made available shortly, and again, a huge thank you to our panelists for their unique insights today.